Batman's 75th anniversary as a protector of Gotham City, he will go down with the elite ranks of American pop culture icons that have had the honor to become a U.S. postal stamp. The stamp collection will feature multiple images of the Caped Crusader from artistically distinct periods across his comic book history, exhibiting the evolution of the Dark Knight over the past 7.5 decades. U.S. Postal Service, in collaboration with Warner Brothers Consumer Products and DC Entertainment, is proud to announce the Batman is now immortalized in a limited edition forever postage stamp collection. Showcasing 8 unique designs and a pane of 20 stamps, the set includes Batman depicted from the 4 eras of comic book history, as well as the 4 incarnations of the famed Bat emblem. Joining us today, we have some gentlemen who are responsible for bringing Batman from the comic book page to center front at the U.S. Postal Service. Let's begin with co-publisher of DC Comics, Dan DiDio.
You know, today, I get all the people with the masks. This is great. I don't know who I'm talking to.
This is a very special day because we have the Batman stamp that came out. Could you tell us a little bit about your role?
Sure. Actually, I'm a co-publisher of DC Entertainment, so I'm responsible for putting out the books involved with Batman on a periodical basis. So our company worked hand in hand with the U.S. Postal Service in putting together these stamps. We gave them a huge assortment of character designs and looks from over the generations, and the great people, the Postal Service, were the ones who were actually picked out and chose the actual stamps themselves.
Could you tell us there's the Golden Age, a little bit about the different ages?
Sure, absolutely. What you see is the 4 generations of comic books as they unveiled over the years. Starting out with the Golden Age is really from the early 30s into the 40s, and then you get into what's called the Silver Age, which is really 50s into 60s, and then the Bronze Age, which is the 70s into the 80s, and now the modern era, which is the comics today. And what they did is they found 4 different artists that really represented those particular different generations, and I'm happy to say that you know, they were extraordinarily well received, and I think they picked really, really nice images.
And you know, it's very difficult to become a stamp.
I've always wanted to be one. I never got a chance to become a stamp.
Tell me why you think Batman's so deserving.
I think honestly, you know, Batman is probably one of the most recognizable brands in the world. The bat symbol is known globally. The character is known from film, television, radio, comics, books, everything you've got out there. And it's translated in multiple languages around the world. So I think just the reach of the character and what the character stands for resonates with so many people that it makes sense for him to be celebrated on a stamp in that fashion.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you now.
To Batman here at the Jacob Javits Center here in New York City.
Thanks, Sam.
The design was actually assigned to me by the Postal Service, but that's harder than it sounds. There are several art directors, and each of us wanted the Batman stamp. So the way I won the day was by telling them this sad story from when I was a kid. I was such a Batman fan that I would run around the house wearing a Batman cape. One time, I was running through the house and I tried to punch the screen door open, but I missed, and I went right through the screen door, cut my wrist, and I told that sad story, and all the other art directors let me have the stamp. That's how I got it. Now, having said that, that has nothing to do with how the Postal Service came to be. The Postal Service chose the Batman stamp simply because it's the 75th anniversary of the stamp, or I'm sorry, the comic book. So that's how that happened. The design came about by working with Warner Brothers and DC Comics. Each of them provided me a host of great images to work with from all the eras, from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern era. And then I also had access to their IP, meaning I had literally access to thousands and thousands of images. And so I sifted through them all, did my best to find those that depicted the era best. Then I presented them to DC Comics and Warner Brothers. They helped me narrow it down. So really, it was an editing project that resulted in the stamp pane that you see. The original Batman was designed by Bob Kane. He came up with the concept for Batman, and he represents what's called the Gold Age. In those days, Batman was sort of aloof and mysterious, a caped crusader who did good in the world. But then the Silver Age came along, and Batman turned into an everyday man. He was a good guy, he was smiling, he was friendly, he was more accessible. That's the age that I grew up with Batman. But then, you know, during the Bronze Age and now in the modern era, that became the slow drift toward the Dark Knight, the sort of confused, complicated, mysterious Dark Knight that we have today. So he's really changed and evolved over the years, and we tried to choose stamps that best reflected those. In fact, all of them came from actual comic books, but by the time they came to me, they were extracted from the comic books and given to me as the art. Then we worked together to make the art work for the stamps themselves. So they all came from actual comic books. They're not just intellectual property, they are actually comic book images.
Are you a stamp collector?
I am. Well, you know what? I grew up a collector when I was a kid. I let it slide for many years, but now that I've been designing stamps for the last 4 or 5 years, I'm back in the game. It's also true that though I collected stamps and I was a Batman fan when I was growing up, I let all of that slide over the years. But when my son was born and he grew up a little bit, this was in the 90s, I started taking him to see Batman movies. At the same time, I introduced him to the Batman graphic novels. And I was surprised, you know, because Batman had really changed since the 60s. He was very dark, but my son loved it. And my son actually helped me recognize that there was a consistent storyline from the early Batman to the modern. And so he is my unofficial and unpaid consultant on the project.
Well, Batman was selected from over 20,000 petitions for a stamp that come in from the citizens and go to the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee, who work closely with our Postmaster General. So it's about 1/10% of the things we receive become a stamp. So, but I think Batman is iconic. It's part of the culture. I'm old enough where, you know, I'm a comic book kid from growing up in, you know, right across the river in Jersey City, and I think that it's just, you know, 75 years needed to be noted on this and how important. But for me, as I said in my speech, I think it's really cool because he wasn't born with superpowers. He didn't mutate into a superhero. He used technology to fight crime, and you know what he would pull off his belt and the Batmobiles, and as we got further on, Batcopters and everything. It's all just really cool stuff.
And how many stamps have been published?
80 million, which is typically we'll do about 20 million stamps on a stamp release. So we have big plans. We know that Batman is important to society, and I think that, you know, and it's great that it's moved through like 4 generations of stamp images at which recognize the changing image of Batman over the 75 years. So we think we have collectors that are my age and maybe older, all the way down to some young kids that are all going to be interested. That's why we went very heavy on this particular stamp printing.
Jim, you're a huge Batman fan, I know.
Yes.
And I'm sure...
Well, that's
I'm
good
sure
to hear. Yeah. Let's get nervous there.
I'm sure you're happy with one of the images on the stamp, for sure.
Sure, yeah.
But do you think these really capture the iconic eras of Batman as a character over 75 years?
You know, we were actually talking about this before. I think you would have to do like 20 stamps and you'd still be leaving off a ton of great artists. So I think it was an impossible task, whittling it down to just 4. But these are, 4 great eras. Obviously the Golden Age, Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and then the Modern Age. And, you know, that last one is one I drew about 10 years ago. I'm very honored to be even closely associated with these greats, you know, Bob Kane, Kurt Swan, Jim Aparo. And it's Kurt Swan, I think, channeling Dick Sprang, and Jim Aparo, obviously very influenced by Neil Adams, so I think we got those guys covered as well. But, you know, there have been so many great artists that have really contributed to the lore and look of Batman. So, yeah, I'm very honored and flattered. I mean, not just to have a stamp of my art, but also to really be associated with these great talents.
And to Jim Lee, I think this will become a hot collectible amongst Batman fans, even who aren't maybe stamp collectors. Having this is going to be an important part of their collection, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I know that I'm going to be sending out Christmas cards using my stamp. That's all you're going to get from me from Christmas. Sorry. But, you know, it's a huge honor. And, yeah, obviously, you know, if you're into Batman, I mean, it's a lifestyle. It's not just about comics anymore. It's about skin art. It's about T-shirts, obviously, collectibles, toys. But stamps, definitely a big part of it, and very easy to store, not like huge long boxes of comics. So 80 million, that should fit in half a garage, I think, right? So anyway.
Customers have until December 8, 2014 to obtain the first day of issue postmark by mail. Affix the stamps to envelopes of your choice, address the envelopes to yourself or others, and place them in a larger envelope addressed to Forever Batman Stamps, Special Events Coordinator, 380 West 33rd Street, Room 4032, New York, New York, 10199-9998. After applying the first day of issue postmark, the Postal Service will return the envelopes through the mail. There is no charge for the postmark up to a quantity of 50. For more than 50, there is a 5-cent charge per postmark. All orders must be postmarked by December 8, 2014. And I'm Kristal Hart reporting on Batman from the Jacob Javits Center here in New York City. Thanks for watching.